day after Nigeria's 64th Independence Day commemoration. Good morning. Welcome to the Morning Brief. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Indeed, it's the day after independence, and it seems that things are settling in to business as usual. But really, Nigerians are looking forward to business unusual. But of course, we must continue in strength. Good morning and welcome to the program. I am Bukola Koka.
So we saw the usual speeches. The president led with the presidential nationwide broadcast, said a number of things, which of course we'll be breaking down much further today. The governors also did theirs. We saw Nigerians, some of them hitting the street to protest, some staying back home, just watching how things panning out, listening to the speeches and enjoying the public holiday. So while yesterday was, yes, a public holiday, bank holiday, call it whatever, we must not lose sight of some of the major issues that are still on the table. And that's why we're here, to ensure that these issues stay on the front burner for the good of our nation. And one of them, Bukola, lest we forget, because there's a tendency to forget things. You just move on quickly because a lot of things, right, just hitting you left, right, and center. This hearing at the House of Representatives about a very dark black man, Bobrisky, Correctional Service, EFCC, and the rest. Now, something happened. Well, a lot of things happened at that hearing, Bukola, but some of the things that were said there are still very, very shocking. And again, we must not forget these things because they touch at the heart of our institutions, the Correctional Service, the EFCC, and the rest. And that's the statement by a Deputy Controller of Corrections in charge of Medium Security Custodial Center, Kirikiri, Lagos. That's Michael Anugwa, saying that he was actually not suspended. He called it a social media suspension because it's a suspension when it's official. But he says he did not get any letter, and that is that leaves a really terrible taste in the mouth, Bukola, because take a look at this statement that was put out by the Civil Defense, Correctional, Fire, and Immigration Services Board, saying it has suspended erring officers of the Nigerian Correctional Service. That statement, dated 26 September 2024, listed Michael Anugwa's name as one of those suspended. There you see that statement, Kola.
Yes, indeed. And it goes on to say that it suspended other, officers of the Correctional Service. Sikiru Adekunle, Deputy Controller of Corrections, in charge of Maximum Security Custodial Center, Kirikiri, and two other officers whom the Minister of Interior has, by the way, clarified that had nothing to do with the Bobrisky case. Yes. One is in another location outside the facility, and the other one is in Ebonyi, Afikpo, to be precise. As you said, Kadi, it does leave a sour taste in the mouth. It speaks to, what exactly happens with disciplinary action for erring behavior within the Correctional Service and also in institutions of government. How do we hold erring officers accountable? Of course, in public and private corporations, for any kind of indiscipline, there is a memo. You get a memo to the effect that you're either suspended or expelled from your duties, either definitely or indefinitely. But if this officer didn't get that, and he has the audacity to refer to this as social media suspension, something that the Minister of Interior himself announced, then it leaves much to be desired. Definitely. But that's not the end of the work of the committee investigating this. There must be accounts, statement of accounts demanded to see whether indeed there was any form of inducement to grant a soft landing to the person.
I think we should just take a listen to what he said. So you get a sense of why we're saying this. So you've seen the statement saying he was suspended, but listen to what he said.
So don't misunderstand us. We won't take side. We are going to do justice. I want to ask you something, sir. Are you under suspension? No letter was given to me to that effect. Are you under suspension? There was a press release at the National Daily and News that I and my colleague in Maximum and some others had been suspended. Were you giving reasons for your suspension? No reason was given, sir. No reason. So they just serve you a letter and tell you to go home. They didn't serve me a letter, sir. Are you on suspension? You said yes. In social media suspension, I then if I have the letter, hello sir, sorry.
Now social media suspension, you get out.
It's just a press. If I have the letter.
So lest we forget, people laughed at that. It seemed like a comedy relief, but that's not funny at all. It is not funny. It's laughable, but it's not funny. It is. I'm trying to look for the safest term to use, but this is not how we should carry on. 64 years since independence. And this is what you have? Nah, definitely.
So was the announcement by the minister for the optics such that it can look as if there's discipline, being entrenched in the institution?
Isaiah Shoyinbo had said it.
It's a correctional.
He didn't say anything.
It's a correctional service.
Yeah.
It's supposed to correct this kind of behavior, And we must also speak to the, disclosure by the prosecutor of the EFCC that indeed, the kind of offense of the person in question, Bobrisky, does not require, putting a maximum correctional service, and indeed that such kinds of offense, the dropping of the charges is warranted for that kind of behavior. But then again, there's also been revelations about inducement. So accounts must be, investigated, looked into to see whether indeed there was inducement to grant the person in question a soft landing. So the investigations must be thorough and not be, a major trial for the optics, for people to see that perhaps indeed something is being done. And then after all, it's, a movement without motion. It doesn't get us anywhere. There must be a definite end to what we're seeing right now.
So the Minister of Interior, the Board of Civil Defense, Correctional, Fire and Immigration Services, over to you now. You've basically been made laughing stock. You saw people chuckle there, and that's not what we want. If this institution is meant to enforce the law, correct as we say, then you need to show that you are serious. But what do we have for you on the show this morning? Much more. President Bola Tinubu says his government is aware of the struggles faced by many Nigerians, and even goes ahead to reel out the measures taken by his government to retool the economy and stimulate productivity. But some figures he gave have been controversial, particularly the ways and means, saying it's been cleared, but some say no, it's just been restructured. But guess what? The rubber meets the road on the show this morning as we weigh his words against the reality.
So what happens when those funds do not go where they ought to go to? We look at some consequences this morning as we x-ray the health sector. We approach the projected peak of cholera, as spoken of prior to this time, and the numbers keep rising in some states with suspected cases in others. What more needs to be done? We ask those very important questions this morning.
Oh yes, so we're watching the cholera situation across the country. But that's not all. With Nigerian movies making big entries in the box office and on streaming platforms, epic stories are pulling their weight as well, with a showing of rich culture and history like never before. So we sit with one of the leading directors in Nollywood as he walks us through his latest creation, Lishabi, The Uprising.
But what's all this without your contribution? So we call for it as always. And of course, we'll be, reviewing some of your thoughts to the day's big stories. So start typing #CTV Morning Brief on all platforms. What our favorite social media platform is X. So we want to read from you as always. We look forward to some of those very, very informed and humorous comments. So start typing. We'll be taking your reactions in just a moment, Kaidi.
Absolutely. But we're starting off with the top stories. Your comments are up in about 10-15 minutes. It's a full package today, guys. Stay with us. It's a Morning Brief. Well, top stories on the brief at this hour. It's the day after Nigeria's 64th Independence Day celebration, and President Bola Tinubu took the moment to speak on the nagging issue of economic hardship, promising a reduction in food prices, living costs, and vowing not to falter on it. He also announced progress in the fight against terrorism and banditry, stating that over 300 Boko Haram and bandit commanders have been eliminated. Well, President Tinubu then promised to convene a 30-day confab for the youth in the country to discuss and address challenges confronting them.
The economy is undergoing the necessary reforms and retooling to serve us better and more sustainably. If we do not correct the physical misalignment that led to the current economic downturn, our country will face an uncertain future and the peril of unimaginable consequences. Thanks to the reform, our country attracted foreign direct investment worth more than $30 billion in the last year. Fellow compatriots, our administration is committed to free enterprises, free entry and free exit in investment while maintaining the sanctity and efficacy of our regulatory processes. This principle guides the divestment transaction in our upstream sector, where we are committed to changing the fortune positively. As such, ExxonMobil surplus divestment will receive ministerial approval in a matter of days.
But he's not the only one who's been speaking about the event. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has lamented the political situation in the country, warning that Nigeria could slide into a one-party system. In a message to commemorate Nigeria's 64th independence anniversary on Tuesday, he urged political leaders to unite and safeguard the country's democracy. Now, part of the statement reads, "Our political milieu is or has become corrosive. Opposition parties languish in weakness, while the ruling party appears to manipulate internal process to render them ineffectual." The 2023 presidential candidate of People's Democratic Party also appealed to political leaders across all party lines to forge a formidable coalition. And for the presidential candidate of the Labour Party in the 2023 election, Peter Obi, he says Africa's largest nation needs urgent rescue from further decay. Mr. Obi stated this in a statement on his X handle, where he highlighted the nation's challenges across economic, social, and security sectors. In his words, "When we compare ourselves to countries that gained independence around the same time, before or after us, Nigeria stands out as a nation in decline, urgently in need of rescue from further decay." The former Anambra State governor expressed worry over what he describes as Nigeria's underperformance in key areas of development, wondering whether the nation has truly improved the lives of its people. And some others took to the streets to mark the day with protests. Members of the Revolution Now movement protested in the nation's capital, Abuja, and Lagos against the state of the nation's economy. Well, the October 1st protest, tagged Fearless in October, was propagated on social media some 2 months after the August End Bad Governance protest that demanded reversal of petrol subsidy, removal, and electricity tariff increase, but were eventually dispersed in Abuja after policemen shot tear gas. However, the FCT Police Command denied attacking the protesters. A statement from the police relations of a command, Joseph Inade, says the operatives only took proactive measures to prevent looting. And as part of efforts to reduce transportation costs and unemployment, the federal government has launched 2,000 CNG-powered tricycles into the transportation sector. The director of the Presidential Compressed Natural Gas Initiative, Michael Oluwagbemi, while fielding questions from journalists, said the launch is a fulfillment of the promises of the President, that's President Tinubu administration, in providing a cheaper means of transportation through CNG and environmental sustainability through the use of cleaner energy. Let's tell you that the National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, has urged President Tinubu to beef up security in schools across the country. The association mobilized its members to the streets of the FCT to celebrate Nigeria's Independence Day in Abuja. NANS President Lucky Monafe also commended the president for the students' loan initiative. And the October 5th, 2024 local government election in Rivers State will be another opportunity for Rivers people to witness the rebirth of a new political structure that they can own. And that's in spite of a controversy surrounding the date. That's according to Governor of the state, Siminalayi Fubara, when he received a group known as the Simplicity Movement, made up of members from various political backgrounds at the government house in Port Harcourt.
Our election will hold on the 5th of October. I'm aware that RISEC told me they already had an order mandating them to conduct the election on the 5th and the security agencies to support them. So I think with that order, the election will hold. I might not be a lawyer, but I know that there is something they call first in hand. And since they have the first in hand, we will give them all the necessary support for that election to be conducted. And it will be one of the best elections ever held in Rivers State, free and fair in this state.
Well, Benue State is also counted down to local government elections, and the state governor says his administration remains committed to ensuring free, transparent, and credible local government elections, just as he says he has managed the affairs of the state transparently. Governor Alia, who was represented by his deputy, Mr. Samode, gave the commitment while flagging off the APC local government election campaign in Boko ahead of October 5th. And on to health matters now, with the outbreak of cholera disease in Ebonyi State claiming 18 lives and leading to 80 confirmed cases, Governor Francis Wiforu has pledged to intensify awareness campaigns to combat not only cholera, but also other communicable diseases like cancer and sickle cell. He made this known during an event to celebrate Ebonyi at 28 in Abakaliki, the state capital, where he noted that his government is taking a comprehensive approach to addressing public health issues. And outside the country now, Iran launched a barrage of missiles at Israel yesterday in response to the killings of Iran-backed militant leaders, sending Israelis to shelters and prompting alarm across the region. The firing of missiles came after Israel said its troops had launched ground raids into Lebanon, though describing them as limited. The Israeli campaign in Lebanon is the biggest escalation of regional warfare since fighting erupted in Gaza a year ago. A report said between 150 and 200 missiles had been fired in the attack. Israel has promised a response in kind. And on to sports now, Kai Havertz and Bukayo Saka inspired Arsenal's 2-0 success against Paris Saint-Germain on Tuesday as Gunners secured their first win in the Champions League this season. Havertz headed Arsenal into the lead and Saka netted before the interval to underline their superiority at the Emirates Stadium. Well, after drawing their opening league phase tie at Atalanta, Mikel Arteta's side moved into 4 points in their bid to reach the knockout stage of the revamped tournament. It was also a win night for Barcelona, Borussia Dortmund, and Manchester City. Well, there you have it. The top stories at this hour, but what have you been saying about these stories and other trending issues? Bukola joins me now as we walk through your comments. Bukola, what you got for us?
Yes, hello again, Kari. Quite a lot this morning. Nigerians are talking about, of course, the president's speech. Yesterday, the high point for many Nigerians, even from our conversation, was the announcement of the youth confab that will last for 30 days. And Nigerians are talking about that as well. Of course, the protests, that dotted the landscape throughout the country on October 1 also forms a major talking point. Bakari, let's start with the 30-day National Youth Confab as announced by Mr. President yesterday. And Oluwaseun sends in his thoughts first this morning, and they say, I hope this yields a good outcome that will be implemented by the government. The senators and the reps who voted should be more proactive in their duties too. The confab report from Jonathan's administration could be used as template and blueprint for this.
And John Adeleke says that this is a positive move. What I will expect the youth organizations to do is to forge a united front and demand for the date of commencement. Each youth organization should try to put their best foot forward at this confab. And he says the discussions there should reflect youth aspiration.
Well,
that's what this user says.
That's some goodwill, some optimism, about this youth confab. So let's see how it goes. Omoyan is the next one speaking, and they say, is this necessary? Where's the fund to spend on the project coming from? $1.56 billion World Bank loan. Why not implement major ones at GE Jonathan confab?
Right. So essentially saying we've had other confabs, but some will say you get updates even with devices from time to time. You get updates. So maybe this is meant to be an updated confab with the young people leading this one. Well, the jury's still out there, but we wait to see what the dates the commencement will be. The president did not announce it, so we don't know if it's this year, next year, or the one after. So while we wait, let's tell you about some of the protests that we saw in some parts of the country, at least in the nation's capital, Abuja, and in Lagos. And this protest is over high living costs. What have Nigerians been saying about this? Well, take a look at what Jason Vince has to say. By the way, that's the final comment on that one. But Jason Vince says that let's hope there will be change in any aspect that the citizens would benefit from. So that is essentially an angle to this one, really. Some have said that maybe this youth confab will provide an opportunity for people to also air their grievances, right? So there's the protests on the streets, there's also the protests in the rooms, or at least the dialogue, presenting demands and the rest. So we see how that one plays out. But still staying with that protest, you see this one from Mike, which says that the government must understand that the people are not happy. And that's the essence of protest, to voice your concerns. Let the government know that, hey, this is what we feel, basically.
Yeah. Well, El Kopik is the next person speaking, and they say, I hope the protest yields positive outcome. Well, history of protest has, told us very many details to the contrary. They're hardly successful. But the question is, will Nigerians stop protesting or develop another strategy to getting their demands heard? NG News also says it's encouraging to see citizens raising their voices and taking action. Peaceful protests are a powerful tool for expressing concern and demanding change. Hopefully, this leads to positive solutions and improvements for the community in Ibadan. Not just in Ibadan now. Well, there's some sentiment for
charity
Ibadan.
Begins at home for this user. It's like, well, let's talk about it first. Everybody should represent their own locales. But let's show you what happened in Port Harcourt, where thugs are said to have taken over the protest ground. And it was quite shocking to see the thugs wielding canes and telling journalists, you must not cover it, you cannot cover this. If you come here, we're going to deal with you. And this is in a democracy, and you have security operatives. So I'd like you to take a look at that video and tell you what Nigerians have been saying about that one. So thugs took over the protest ground in Port Harcourt, and police fired tear gas at the protesters in Abuja. Taken over in Port Harcourt on channels, TV, social media handles, and on YouTube. It was a terrible sight to see. But let's see what Oluwatosin has to say in response to this, saying that that's the duty of the police to take care of, right? And it's just a no-brainer, right? If you have thugs taking over, those who are law enforcers should come in and handle the situation. It says it's part of why citizens employ them to deal with thugs and miscreants, ensuring peace and order. So there's no excuse whatsoever to have that playing out where you have law enforcement agencies.
Well, Idiolongo says hungry police are firing tear gas at protesters. They're hungry for a president that is not hungry. Some very piercing thoughts there coming in from Idiolongo, but it's noteworthy that Nigerians can still come out after what happened during the last protest, 10-day protest, during which some Nigerians were arrested and some are still in court, trying to determine what offense it is that they committed. But Nigerians are out again on the streets undeterred. It speaks to some form of resilience, whether we like it or not. And the police bears the responsibility to ensure order during these protests and protect the rights of Nigerians. It's a sacred right of Nigerians to protest, to air their grievances, the right to a peaceful, to lawful assembly.
Yeah, so the police can't tell us that they've not made arrests, right? If there are people who are disrupting, a peaceful protest, those people should be arrested. Find out who is sponsoring them. These are, simple things that the police is meant to handle. So the Rivers Police Command, where you have a lot of answering to do, have those people been arrested? Who sent them? Let us get some sort of closure so these things won't spiral into bigger things, right? So we don't begin to see these same people engaging in kidnapping and all of that because they were not arrested for seemingly smaller crimes. It's a no-brainer. So we expect that you do right by the people. But guess what? Keep your comments coming in, #CTV Morning Brief. But we'll take a moment now. When we return, we'll take a look at the president's economic speech. You can break down the speech into different areas.
Economic part of the speech.
Yeah, economic part of the speech. There were some figures he gave, right? What do those figures mean? How are they, translating to the reality, whether they're true or not? These are issues we'll take a look at in just a few seconds. Stay with us right now.
Welcome back to the Morning Brief on Channels Television. And of course, stemming up on the back of the president's speech yesterday, there have been a flurry of reactions from Nigerians, the high point being the announcement of a national confab. But of course, we've dispensed with that part of the conversation yesterday as much as possible. And this time around, we're looking at the economic part of the president's speech. Of course, Nigerians have been talking about how it's high on compassion and how the president, takes into cognizance the fact that Nigerians are struggling with the economic reforms. But the president said something key yesterday, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And besides that, he made some very definitive statements in that speech yesterday. Of course, he talked about paying back the inherited forex backlog of $7 billion, that the administration has cleared the Ways and Means debt of over 30 trillion naira and reduced the debt service ratio from 97% to 68%. So this bears, this elicits needs for scrutiny and some questions. And to help us understand this morning, we have joining us Mr. Dari Osamo. He's a founder, CEO, Impact Energy and Logistics Limited. He's also the Chief Financial Officer, University of Warwick Business School. He joins us virtually. We also have Mr. Aliyu Audu. He's the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. He joins us from our Abuja studio. We also have Mr. Gospel Obele, a research economist who joins us this morning virtually. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start
Good
with...
morning for having me.
Yes. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Audu. Of course, I'm sure you have read through the speech, being an insider, and of course, I'm also sure that you've, seen some of the reactions, from Nigerians who have put a question mark on some of the declarations of the president in that economic part of the speech. So I'd like you to speak to the authenticity, indeed, of the declaration by the president, particularly with regards to reports from the last administration and even this administration that the 30 trillion naira ways and means had been securitized in different portions to be paid back over a period of time. So how come we now hear that, that has been cleared? Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu, did you hear my question? Mr. Liu, did you hear my question?
Towards the end, yeah. I can hear you now. Towards the end, yeah. I can hear you now. Towards the end, yeah. I can hear you now.
Oh, we're going to try to address that and return to Mr. Liu. But I'll take it now to Mr. Gospel Obele to respond to the same question. Mr. Obele, did you hear me?
Very much for having me. I would say it's a very mixed narrative. It's a very mixed narrative. Globally and contextually, we're in very, very sensitive times. And there is almost no economy right now in the world that is not going through something similar in terms of cost of living crisis, in terms of worsening business environment, struggling with growth, worsening living standards. So it's a general global problem. The state around climate risk and its impact on food security and the like. So it's a growing general problem. However, the dynamics or the weight of these challenges, when you look at, depending on where that economy stands in terms of being developed, underdeveloped, or whatever the case may be, could also nuance around the weight of the reality of those challenges on ground. So for Nigeria, it's more severe, and more severe because we've not been able to gain the momentum or the control over the critical elements that are shaping these outcomes for the Nigerian people. So I said all that to say that to establish the fact that whoever is in power, the government and all that, would always find a challenge in times like this. So it's not a conversation of who is in power. It's the reality of the context in times we live in. However, we've also have built some form of reactive response, to challenges and times like this. And if you look at the array of policies that have been delivered over a period of time right now, even since the last 1 year in current administration, they've not been proactively positioned, to enable growth and development, or preferably even improve standard of living. And you can see where inflation is sort of skyrocketing to. Yeah, a couple of people will say, oh, but inflation have dropped. But that's a very, very, very illiterate argument with all sense of respect, because inflation hasn't dropped. It is the pace of increase in prices that has slowed down. So, so it's just a conversation of jargon right now in Nigeria. So I would say that whilst there's some form of commitment by the current administration to get it right, I would still say that it's tactics, it's processes.
Mr. Obele, that's not the point of my question. Pardon me, perhaps I should repeat myself. The declarations by the president as far as the economic part of his speech yesterday is concerned, that the debt to revenue ratio has been reduced, the ways and means has been cleared. If that were the case, wouldn't it impact, on the economy to the effect that we would experience some form of stability, even in the exchange rate and in FX accretion? I'd like you to speak to the authenticity of that part of the president's speech, and with regards to the fact that, at different times in the recent past, the immediate past administration and the current one had announced the securitization of the ways and means loan, the 30 trillion naira, in different portions now.
Yes, so to put it again in context, that is exactly what I'm speaking to, and I was just trying to lay a context around it. So what I mean is, now, when you talk about the reduction of debt to GDP ratio and securitization of the ways and means and all of that, right? These are key indicators to governments that they are performing, but they are also not enough reflection of what people are going through on the ground. So that's what I was trying to say as well. It's just a context conversation. And debt to GDP ratio, if you look at it, really what it means in context to the living standards of Nigerians, it doesn't in any way translate to improved state of the economy. All right. It just means that you're probably taking a lesser form of your quote unquote GDP size, to service your debt, as the case may be. So whilst that is an improvement or is an authentic stance when you're measuring how government is performing. It's still not completely authentic when you look at it from the lens of improving the livelihoods or the state of the Nigerian economy. And that's because metrics or indicators like that do not really have a transferable impact on the average Nigerian, and they don't have that because you've not developed the pipeline through which that impact will flow to the average Nigerian. All right, how does a debt to GDP ratio metric translate to improved livelihood? How does that translate? These are deeper conversations beyond just a presidential announcement. So in terms of authenticity of the statement, it is authentic on the grounds of how governments in the world today talk about economic indicators, but it is not authentic enough in terms of how individuals and the state of the economy right now is being played out.
All right, I'll take the same question now to our next speaker, Mr. Osamo. I'd like you to respond to it in the same breath, particularly with regards to concerns that the administration is securing loans. So is it possible that in the last 16 months, the 30 trillion naira ways and means has been cleared?
Thank you very much for having me. Reacting to the statement of the president as regards the reduction in the cost of servicing the national debt, that is a good development because the interest element of it that are being saved will be approved to the national allocation, which will thereafter be allocated to the state and the subnationals. As per the ways and means, which it is a statutory permission by the central bank to advance funding to the government during a temporary budget period that are shortfall. The reduction from about 30-something trillion to whatever amount now is a sign of a prudent management of resources. You see, sometimes when you are managing scale obligation like Nigeria, you need to know the importance of making funding available to all the instrument and all the instrument of governance. Imagine when there are shortfall and then the government is cash strapped, you went to the city and are unable to reduce to access funding. To me, the way that mean, it's not the quantum of the ways and means that have been taken, it's the ability to be able to reduce it. The question is this: what percentage reduction have been reduced? And if I thought they be securitize their balance, to me, it's all about postponing the evil day. And then what we need to do is to make sure that the government, from this standpoint, will not increase that gap again, so that the run rate of repayment at the end of the day will be lower. Because the way I mean, it's an advancement to the government, and by extension, that's to be repaid down the road. Where will the repayment be coming from? That's to come from the state and national allocation. Right. If this amount has been reduced and has been restructured, I think it's a good one on the side of the government. So just for the government to make sure that going forward, that amount and the quantum of reduction is being made, so that over time, the quantum of waste may be taken from the government can be used, and by extension, that there are sufficient funds to be allocated to this statement for development and national growth.
Just to be clear and reiterate the point or the question being asked here, it's from the president's words, he said, we have cleared the ways and means debt of over 30 trillion naira. So he was clear, unequivocal, saying it has been cleared, not it has been securitized, not payments spread for a longer period. You get. He said it has been cleared, and that's essentially the question to Mr. Bailey and Mr. Osamo. Do you think that the president tried to push this too far by saying it has been cleared when evidence says otherwise? And that's, I just want to maybe a yes or no from Mr. Osamo and Gospel.
Thank you very much. I think I will lean to support the statement of the president.
Okay, so so you believe he has cleared it?
I believe that been cleared. Okay. It's all about nomenclature.
No, I understand. I understand that point, Mr. Samuel. Let me ask Gospel. I understand, but clear is clear. If you clear your debts, you don't have your debt anymore. Gospel, do you agree? Have they been cleared from the evidence we have? Gospel, that's for you. Do you agree that it's been cleared? Please unmute so we can get your response. Gospel, please unmute so we can get you.
Yeah, I said I do not completely agree.
All right. So you don't agree that it's been cleared. I just wanted to get that point before we go to Mr. Aliyu. So Mr. Aliyu, over to you now. Well, again, you're an insider, as Bukola said, so you probably knew all of these things before they came out, and you have an inside view into what's going on. Why would the president say that Ways and Means has been cleared? Over 30 trillion of it been cleared by his administration when evidence says otherwise. Clearing a debt is one thing, securitizing it or deferring the payment is another thing entirely.
All right, I think it's a matter of understanding. Ways and Means is actually a burden on the CBN, which exposes the Apex Bank, and by clearing it, securitizing it, it's one of those things as to bring about transparency in the dealings of CBN and how they interact with federal government in terms of the Ways and Means. And if you remember clearly, about 4.5 trillion was raised from the stock market through FGN bonds, treasury bills, and CBN special bills. These were all means of getting the stock market involved in securitizing the Ways and Means in ways that brings about transparency, brings about exposure. It not necessarily means that they've been paid off as debt. They've been converted to debt and been given a long time repayment period through these bonds that were issued and oversubscribed at the time. If you remember, it's what Mr. President refers to as being clear. I mean, CBN is in a better position now, to drill out and implement other monetary policies in such a way that the burden of the Ways and Means isn't right there in the face.
This is a very important point because people want to trust government, but that trust deficit is there. So when they hear that Ways and Means has been cleared over 30 trillion naira and the evidence speaks against it, they begin to wonder, so what else are you lying to us about? And that's my question. Is it a challenge with those who wrote that speech for the president, because they could have put it in the right words rather than saying you clear debt? Say what we did. We tried to make it more transparent. We tried to defer payments so the burden is reduced on government and not outright clearance. This is a question of trust, and that's the point I'm trying to raise here. So how is this going to be fixed such that the trust is maybe rebuilt? Because it's widening the deficit, seeing this and seeing the reality.
Well, I think the details usually comes from CBN quarters, and what Mr. President referred to yesterday as far as the burden that this Ways and Means posed to CBN is, that burden has been taken off. That's what Mr. President refers to as it being cleared. If it be converted to debt that's going to be paid over a period of time, nobody is saying those debts have been paid. But we are just saying that the burden that it poses to CBN being able to do what it ought to do, as controller of the economy, is being taken off, and in such a way, and that other aspects of our debt management have been dealt with to reduce our debt management, our debt servicing from the 98% to revenue ratio we used to have to about 67 to 68%. That's what Mr. President referred to as yesterday, not at any point meant to mislead anyone that this has been paid off.
But Mr. Liu, that is still difficult to take in, because the loans, cumulative loans secured by this administration from the World Bank is $774 million, according to reports. And apart from that, the FIRS has only been able to surpass its target to the tune of a collection of 3.4 trillion naira revenue. And Nigeria's current debt is 102 trillion naira. So where did the revenue come from? Because the president's statement was quite categorical. So where did the revenue deploy to clearing this 30 trillion naira? Where did it come from? Mr. Liu.
Hello? I'd
like you to explain to Nigerians where the revenue for this clearing of the 30 trillion naira, where did it come from? because the World Bank loan cumulatively obtained from this administration, according to reports, is over $700 billion. And Nigeria's current debt is over 102 trillion naira. That's about $97 billion. And, you know, the FIRS has only been able to surpass its own target of non-oil sources of revenue to the tune of 3 trillion naira. So where did the revenue that the administration deployed to clear the 30 trillion naira ways and means, where did it come from?
Okay, this is different from, I mean, you're asking a question that is different from what I just tried to explain. I think the guys from CBN will do a better job at it. But it isn't that the ways and means, you know, as a burden. Ways and means is a burden on CBN, not on the government. You know, it's money borrowed to government as an advance, you know, payment to government to run its business. It's a burden on CBN that has now been lifted up. You know, that's what the clearance means. I mean, they've been done through treasury bills, they've been done through bonds, they've been done through CBN special bills, you know, and it's given them enough time to be able to now settle this while dealing with the other responsibility of, you know, getting our monetary policies implemented in such a way that, you know, gives confidence to investors and, you know, lead to economic growth.
Well, I'm trying to understand your explanation, Mr. Liu, but you know, I know how difficult it is to reconcile all of the figures. So I'm just going to take it to Mr. Obele this time around, you know, to react to some other part of the president's speech. Mr. Obele, the president also approved the economic stabilization bill. He spoke to that yesterday, and according to him, it will be transmitted to the National Assembly. And the president provided the assurance that the bill will make business environment more friendly and stimulate investment in the economy. We've had several economic programs in the past. Under the past administration, there was the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. You know, but some Nigerians would say that the past administration set Nigeria back economically by many years because there was little result, you know, on the impact of the economy, of the economic stabilization, economic recovery growth of the past administration. So how optimistic are you about this economic stabilization bill to transform Nigeria's economic fortunes vis-a-vis its fiscal and monetary policy programs that is still under scrutiny about its efficacy, you know, to provide some form of stability to the economy?
Thank you very much for the question. I am not confident that this particular stability program will deliver in any way. Because you want to also take a cue from other ones that have failed, you know, and very clearly, although rather you need a plan to get out of a crisis. So which is why we keep saying economic growth, stability, development plans, recovery plans, whatever the names are, needs, development plans and all those things. You always will need a plan to get out of a crisis. So reasons why we constantly always have these plans. However, all of the plans have failed because we are in a worse off situation than where we were. All right. And I don't think this one has a chance of succeeding. And that's because of many factors, right? You have the case where even how the plans are designed, you know, is quite questionable in terms of, is it very reflective? I mean, when I mean reflective, intelligently reflective of the current state of livelihood issues or doing business challenges within Nigeria, and how much of forward-thinking, evidence-based input went into it, how much of strategic consultations, because emphasis on the word strategic, because I mean, someone can then come out and say, oh, there were consultations, but consultations with who? You know, how did you pull together the team of those that were consulted? Then you now take a step further to say, how were those plans developed in terms of, are they designed in such a way that they can deliver on the nitty-gritty elements of development, the strands and all of that? For instance, now, when you talk about industrialization as a component of the plan, how will that industrialization be delivered? How many institutions, how many firms, how many businesses will be supported towards, you know, industrialization? How many businesses will are we seeking to grow or scale within the Nigerian environment, inside that industrialization component? And then how many jobs will those businesses create? I don't know if you get what I mean. So the plan has to be able to identify those nitty-gritty lines as it translates, like I talked about earlier on, the pipeline of impact for the average Nigerian. So if a development plan does not indicate how many jobs it will create in how many states, in how many locales and all of that, how it will probably plan to partner with subnational governments and NDAs, and you need to see a strategic flow of thinking as regards how that plan will be delivered, plus how that plan will be financed. It has to be very clear and it has to be sustainable. Plus, who will deliver or action the execution of that plan? Are they capable? Are they able? So, for instance, if you look at the Empower, for instance, it was a one-size-fits-all approach. Trying to just use one model to deliver jobs across different sectors. So it failed on many grounds. All right, even largely on its execution. So you want to look at all these critical components, and then how does that plan prospectively delivers on the sustainable development agenda of the Nigerian economy? I'm not talking about United Nations or the sustainable development agenda, the prosperity agenda of the Nigerian people. How does that plan? So if you look at that plan from these metrics I mentioned, right, you can tell exactly from scratch that it would most likely not deliver. Again, you also look at the fiscal and monetary, like you mentioned, the inefficacies of the policies, how those policies keep clashing, how those policies are not forward-thinking enough in terms of reflective in empowering or engineering growth and development. Take, for instance, now, in the Nigerian context, and largely in some nations in the world today, interest rates alone are not enough to solve the inflationary challenge we're faced with.
Right.
And that's because that inflationary challenge has been nuanced into what we term as the increasing rise or a rise in the cost of living crisis. Right. So whilst inflation may be going down, in my opinion, I don't think it's going down. I think that the pace of increase in food, commodities, and all of those things have only slowed down. All right, and then that's why you see that it's so expensive for people to buy a basket of tomatoes, even if you see the inflation numbers have gone down. So if you put all these ideas in context of the plan,
right,
it's most likely dead on arrival. Apologies to say.
Well, it's very interesting when you just take a look at some of those items in the president's speech. I mean, you've spoken about the stabilization bit. Let me come to Mr. Oshamo and talk about the energy bit, because that's your sector. You're well versed in that sector. Some people had said that they had expected the president to say something about maybe petrol or energy, to the extent that it's actually a major determinant of the cost of living, cost of food and the rest. They say that petrol is so much in everything that you can literally smell it in food and all other things, just because the cost is added to that. So when you listen to the president and you didn't hear the conversation around energy costs, petrol, because it has been a major controversial issue, do you think that was deliberate? Do you think it was an omission? Or do you think the government has done enough and they're like, you know what, let's hands off. You people just deal with it?
Thank you very much. I think it's a missed opportunity by the president to actually assume the fear of the populace. An Independence Day speech around the challenges of petroleum and every other thing will have gone a long way in placating the populace. However, you need to understand the significance of the impact of the policy that the government has recently taken. Energy is my sector, and I can tell you from the industry standpoint that effective this month, there is going to be a significant shift in the body as regards the petroleum product in Nigeria. For me, I think the president needs an opportunity to actually mention, even if it's a line, look, the government is looking at the cost of bringing down the cost of petroleum. That would go a long way in making a lot of people happy. But aside the mixing the opportunity, I think there are deliberate plans by the government to make sure that the problem of petroleum is solved permanently. What the president has done, given the recent policies to make sure that availability problem has been solved, and availability problem is solved about making sure that this products are available. Now we have to move to pricing problem, and pricing problem is a function of many variables. And one of them is to make sure that, look, these products are being refined locally. By the time you refine locally, you eliminate a lot of foreign input on this product. However, you need to know that if you're able to solve the petroleum problem in the Nigerian economy, that will give price a lot of benefit because the pressure on the FX is going to be reduced. If you look at the daily FX consumption in Nigeria, importation of petroleum products constitutes about 40% of that. And if you mark that dollar to dollar, that means we are talking about 40% of the pressure on dollar. So with time, we're beginning to see a kind of depression in on naira as regards the dollar and every other thing. So to me, it's a missed opportunity. But things have been done on the ground.
So let me take this to Mr. Ali Aldu in Abuja studio, because I know that petrol is a big deal even for you. Nobody is left out except you're using maybe a Tesla. But everybody has to buy petrol if you're not buying for your generating set, for your vehicle, or other things. So what do you think was the thinking in the speech that wasn't mentioned? What we got was, general conversation around divestment and all of that, which, well, may mean a lot for those who are in business, right? But for the Nigerian people who have been looking back and forth, how much will we buy petrol? 1,000 plus. That's what we're buying it now. Would it grow? Will it reduce? What will the president say about it? Well, they didn't hear anything. So was that deliberate, really? Or what exactly is it thinking?
All right. I mean, like you rightly said, the part of speech that didn't mention petrol is the fact that it shows the commitment from Mr. President in terms of deregulating the petroleum sector. I mean, he did mention, alternatives that could give succor to our economy, especially when it comes to cost of living, cost of food. That's the compressed natural gas. And the presidential initiative on the compressed natural gas, he took time to mention what the government is doing as far as that is concerned. And it doesn't look like, even with the Naira for crude scheme, that the petrol PMS is going to come down by a whole lot, And it really, even though it's what Nigerians want to hear, but the reality is, we are going to have to seek opportunities in alternative means of, powering our vehicles, powering all the other things we use the PMS for. That's why government is big on this conversion, on the CNG conversion. Government is big on the presidential initiative, with the presidential initiative on compressed natural gas. It has witnessed a lot of investment, $175 million in the last, 1 year alone. And it's gone from, conversion centers have gone from 7 to 125 as it is. This is clearly telling us that, we, as much as we like the petrol thing, it doesn't economically look like what is our best bet today. We should start thinking of alternatives. And, President cannot promise what he can't deliver on. Promising that the petrol price is going to come down, it doesn't seem feasible. And as such, there's really no point going about it. That's why he's like, what does the government do to ensure that the pressure is reduced in terms of cost of living for the citizen, is to improve, availability of the compressed natural gas, conversion centers across the country, which has been, a lot of work has been done on that. And maybe, just maybe, when we shift away from petroleum product, from this PMX, cost of transportation, cost of food will come down, and cost of living will basically generally improve.
And Mr. Audu, I'd like you to provide an update on that if you can, because the big work that you say the president, the administration is doing in terms of deployment of CNG has not quite translated into impact across the country. We know that CNG buses have been deployed to states like Kwara, Ogun, Adamawa. What updates can you provide to Nigerians in terms of how soon those CNG buses can go across the 36 states of the Federation, because indeed there has been announcement of investment of resources to the purchase of CNG buses, and the infrastructure for a country of over 200 million people, 175 stations is definitely inadequate. So what updates can you provide about how soon those CNG infrastructure will go across the 36 states of the Federation?
All right. I mean, the federal government is partnering seriously with states to set up conversion centers and invest in a mass transport system that are going to be running on the CNG, basically. But the good thing about this is the president isn't looking at having these buses, wholly imported. They are being assembled locally here, and there's been a lot of waivers on importation for the kits, and a lot is being put in place now to ensure manufacturing of some of these kits, the cylinders, and the other parts of the kits, or other parts of the conversion generally locally, so as to create jobs and ensure that we're not exporting our jobs, and while we have a number of unemployed citizens here. I think it's while the government will not put money into setting up or buying assembled cars, what it's doing is to ensure that it facilitate investment in this sector, provide whatever support the investors at different level of the chain require to expand the acceptance and increase the use of CNG across the country. And that would basically take a little time. It's a shift in how we currently run our cars, and it's going to take a while for people to build trust and understand that is a better alternative right now to PMS, and this will equally provide investment opportunity for investors in this sector, so as to open up the other states that currently don't have, and have as much as many conversions, stations, many refueling stations across the country for users.
Indeed. That will take time, you rightly noted, and the price of petrol is definitely not waiting for time. It keeps going on, and Nigerians are groaning beneath the weight of the impact of that on other aspects of national life. But we'd like to thank you very much indeed, Mr. Aliyu Audu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Thank you for joining us on the program as we anchor. And at this point, we also thank Mr. Dari Osamo, Founder, CEO, Impact Energy and Logistics Limited, who is also the Chief Financial Officer, University of Warwick Business School, who joined us virtually. Mr. Gospel Obele, Research Economist, thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And we move on to the next leg of our conversation. This time around, we'll be looking at other issues, particularly the health sector, as we, touch base with some states of the Federation where they are currently dealing with the impact of the cholera outbreak. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
We're talking health this morning. We've talked about the health of the nation's economy, but let's talk about your health. The focus is on cholera. And this started months ago, actually. There were reports in some parts of the country. Then it hit Lagos, and people just woke up and thought, wait a minute, if this can happen in Lagos, what about other states? And then we start seeing cases. You just heard from a Ebonyi official now speaking about the cases in Ebonyi State. So we're approaching the peak period of cholera. So the NCDC, they do like projections, and this is usually the peak period. So what do you have to do to ensure that you your family members, those around you are protected? Well, that's the conversation we're having with Dr. Shalomoni, who's a public health physician and MD, Mayor of Primary Health Center. You're welcome to the Morning Brief.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's good first to see, public health centers making a showing, because that is the lifeblood of health in Nigeria.
Right. That's
so
right.
We'll talk about that, the role of public health centers in preventing cholera, treatment, and the general health situation of the country. But I want to quickly draw an inference from the cholera situation in Lagos and how Lagos was able to handle it, because there are other states now, they're probably dealing with these issues.
Exactly.
First, they don't even know because nobody's testing. They just hear deaths and people die, they're buried, and they move on, and just see that people keep dying. So in terms of even tracking these cases, testing and ensuring that they are dealt with properly. So maybe we can borrow from the Lagos case and then extrapolate, particularly in the area of prevention and treatment. Because as of July, this was a major concern in Lagos. People were scared.
Exactly.
But it looks like it has tapered down. So what exactly happened?
The first thing you want to look at is that Lagos has a structure for surveillance, for treatment, for management of outbreaks. And that structure has been, treated well, serviced well, maintained over the years. We coming from back of Ebola to COVID-19. Lagos was the epicenter of COVID-19. But you could see that we were able to curtail COVID-19 such that the mortality came down. So the same thing also panned out with cholera. So we have a structure for surveillance. And when I say structure for surveillance, I'm talking about right from the grassroots. When an index case takes place in Lagos State, or when an outbreak takes place in Lagos State, there are already surveillance officers, there are trackers who get to follow these people up. There are centers where individuals who have this illness can come to and register their complaints. And there are people who will line list you and follow you up. They don't pay lip service to surveillance and tracking of outbreaks in Lagos State. No, it's done real because I've been part of it. So you line list, you look at the index case. The index case is curtailed. For example, if a person reports, into a private facility, all the private facilities in Lagos State already have a connection with the government facilities at the grassroots. So, and there's what called case definition. So when an outbreak enters a facility in Lagos, either private or whatever it is, and there is a definition of that index case, the experts on duty call the grassroots level, which is the primary centers. They have a designated number to call. And from there, the cases are curtailed. Samples are taken. Line listings are done. Families and relatives of those individuals are visited. Even while those individuals are in the hospital, their families are visited. So that takes place, and it gets us out of this.
So while it's interesting to hear the work being done by the authorities, and I really hope that this has been replicated across the states. What you hear is some of the states have just buildings. They don't have manpower, equipment.
Exactly.
And these challenges are there. But I want to speak to Nigerians now, the people who present eventually, hopefully not, because this program is meant to help them prevent this from happening. What are you telling people regarding prevention? Just looking at the NCDC's Twitter handle, for example, you see that a few hours ago, they talked about cholera. In fact, that's, I think, their latest tweet. Stop cholera. Symptoms: sudden severe diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, fever. Now, these are symptoms that people have from time to time, and it's not really cholera. So where does prevention really start from? So I want us to start from the starting point. Then we can now build it up. So where does preventing cholera for everyday person, where does it start from right now?
All right. So I want to categorize these things, when it comes to cholera prevention in terms of geographical location, the individual themselves, the health sector, the health facility, health workers, then we have government. So talking about the geographical, we want Nigerians to be aware that cholera outbreaks are common during rainy season. April to September, we just got into October now. So we have the rainy season ongoing, in major parts of Nigeria. So expect the water bodies the rain to wash certain contaminated, soil or whatever, what have you, to the surface where people depend on water. So there's a lot of contamination ongoing as a result of that. So people need to be aware of that first of all. Then number two, we also need to take cognizance that cholera comes as a result of contaminated water, largely as a result of water. So the water you drink, how potable is your water that you're drinking? What's the source of water drinking on a day-to-day basis as an individual? So the source of water, is it boiled? You may not have these funds to afford the bottled water. What about boiling your water at home and taking a quantity to your place of work, and not leaving it to chances? So that's very important. Number two, washing your hands regularly before you handle food, after food, use the restroom. You must wash your hand even before you touch a food or anything or eat. So you must wash your hand regularly. Very important. Then number three, what is your waste disposal? How is it like, in your office, at home? Many of us right now doing cutting corners. You dispose your refuse, in open places. Defecate in open spaces. So these are things that will not help us, as an individual. So you also have to look at that too. Then when you buy your food, because talking about food hygiene in the market, maybe you bought fruits. You need to wash them properly before you start eating them. Then if there are things that need to be cooked, you need to cook properly. We know the economics is a bit hard on Nigerians now, but then you must look at all of these things to help you, to be able to prevent cholera on a day-to-day basis. So these are things into then also your health-seeking behavior. Once you notice diarrhea, then you don't assume. You must go to the nearest hospital close to you and report. And the doctors there or the medical health workers there can look at all of that, and say, okay, yes, this is likely a suspected case of cholera or not. So that's also important. Your health-seeking behavior as an individual also must improve if you want to really prevent cholera, as a day-to-day lifestyle as a Nigerian.
And we hope that those lifestyle tips, have been internalized, and Nigerians will begin to adjust, because the cases are real.
Yeah, really.
In Ebonyi State, we hear that the death toll has reached 13, and in one other state, we hear that there are suspected cases, in Oyo as well.
Yes.
But I'd like you to speak to prevention at the level of government, because in June, when the cholera cases peaked, the NCDC government activated an emergency response center, to deal with cholera outbreak, and it was to the effect that they will be supporting states, to tackle cholera with the provision of laboratories, test kits in all the states of the federation. So, don't you think, Doctor, that from that time up until now, we ought to have witnessed a reduction rather than a spike in cases? So at what point has the ball been dropped, either by the promised support in the emergency activation by NCDC or states of the federation in terms of provision of infrastructure? Because are we really supposed to be talking about deaths at this point?
At this point, it's very unfortunate, to be having deaths from cholera, especially in Nigeria, where we're looking at becoming, developing, and becoming one of the global powers. So it's unfortunate, because you look at cholera, it's death from poor sanitation. So why we are going to grappling with poor sanitation in 2024? Where did we draw the ball? Well, the government support actually came, because I can remember that a lot of rapid test kits, were supplied to facilities. So I think states now need to take responsibility, because the NCDC actually did step in, because they have a budget that is running, and the kits were provided. But then this is where states need to take responsibility for infrastructures. The federal government will not help you to a certain level, which you have helped yourself as a state. Where are the infrastructures? Where are the personnel? Where is the technical know-how? Of all these individuals. These are important, because we're talking about where are the staff, to collect the sample? Where is the preservative medium for the sample? Where is the communication? So some areas, where you pick sample before you get a feedback, it takes days, weeks, due to distance, due to logistics and all of that. So, states, need to budget for all these things, and make them available, so that, the treatment of cholera, the management of cholera, can be top notch in those states. So another area where governments need to play a good role is in the aspect of policy. policy implementation is very important. We have so many agencies against environmental pollution and all of that, but how many people are we really, bringing to book? How effective is that policy, in our different states? So that one also needs to, come up, because people are dropping ball. They are losing, that sense of, prevention, that collective prevention that will help, every Nigerian. So like open defecation and refuse disposal, how many, homes, offices, have been shut down because of that? Lagos State is doing a great job as far as environmental, pollution is concerned, and also good housing is concerned. But then we look at other areas, other states also. How well are they doing all of this? So this is where I think government needs to, to do well. But NCDC have actually played their role, made the kits available. Though these kits, can be more readily available in all these centers. But then the state also needs to rise up. There's a budget for health. You must make your budget for health to work for you in the state. So I think the government has a role, to play there, and to make sure that even with the ad hoc staff that can be employed, temporarily, train them for a period of time, on how to diagnose this case, or how to track this case, or do surveillance, active surveillance, and also do the testing, transfer the samples, make sure that the end users, they get their results, and then provide isolation centers where cases can be managed to prevent, spread.
We need more evidence just to attest to the fact that indeed the NCDC has provided the kits and the equipment in all 774 local government areas of the country. And I say this because some of the pictures coming in from some of the PHCs in certain states, show some deficit in terms of manpower and what they require to tackle the cases. But Doctor, I want you to now speak to Nigerians about what to do in the case of an emergency, because there are reports that, when there's a suspected case of cholera and it progresses, it kills very fast. So what can first responders do to save someone who has a suspected case of cholera? Okay, all right, so let me start with the individual. Noticing watery diarrhea, the first thing is rehydration. You must rehydrate yourself. That's very important, because what kills very fast in cholera is dehydration. So salt sugar solution, you must start that salt sugar solution as an individual. We have them in sachet forms, so you can get that and start taking that first of all as an individual. Very important. That's one. Number two, go to the hospital, preferably government hospital near you, or a private hospital, closer to you, because depending on the location and distance and availability of government hospital. So go to an hospital near to you and and complain, about your symptoms on time. Don't do self-medication. Don't get drugs over the counter. Don't put yourself as okay, maybe because I took something, my tummy is just reacting. No, just report, because we are in the midst of an outbreak. So you need to get to hospital and report to an health worker. Some government hospitals or some hospitals do not have a medical doctor, in some parts of the country. So, but let's see an health worker and explain that this is what you're having. And from there, the surveillance system in that local government will be activated on your behalf. There's the NCDC, emergency number to call. There's also at that local level, there is a degree of disease notification that's ongoing, at the local level. So from there, a sample will be taken, you'll be isolated, sample will be taken, then you can begin to get rehydrated right on immediately when you see an health worker, in a government facility or in a private facility. So these are things you need to do immediately, when you notice that there's a water diarrhea, you don't give it a chance. Also, your family members too, you want to isolate yourself away from the family members. You don't want to share things with them at that moment, right. And you also want to turn them in, for testing also immediately. These are things you can do, because there could be a continuous spread, from that. In fact, there could be a reinfection also. So these are things you need to do for you to combat once you know that there's a watery diarrhea.
What concerns me most times when we talk about these things is we already have a challenged health sector. Right. If you see the images of some primary healthcare centers,
that's right.
These places don't even deserve to be called dilapidated buildings. They don't deserve to be called abandoned buildings. Talk more of a place that people should come and get healthcare. and we can talk about manpower there, the equipment. You most likely come down with another illness in some of these centers. You went for something else, but you may live with an extra illness. So it's really concerning that we now have extra issues to deal with, and we've not even fixed some of these healthcare centers. But I'd like you to end on this note. I want you to paint the picture in a much more glaring manner. I don't know if your health centers had to deal with a cholera case. If you've had to, maybe you can tell us what the experience was like. And there's a tendency for people to think, it will not happen to me, right? I stay in this area, right? And I'm not even a poor person in that sense. So if have you had to deal with a cholera case?
Exactly.
What was the demography of the person or the people like in terms of age? You can talk the sex, the social status, and all of that. So people understand that these things are real, and they begin to know that, hey, maybe it can happen to anyone if you're not careful.
Away from what has been, that cholera is a disease of under 5 children and all of that. Actually, the initial cases we were grappling with in the facility had to do with the elderly, the adults, the middle age, working class. Wow. The social status is there. Not just the lower social. No, the middle socioeconomic class. The guy was involved in a party and all of that, and from there travel all the way down to a guy travels on Monday, comes back on Friday to the family and all of that. So coming back home on weekends and discover all of this. So it has nothing to do with children only. Yes, children under 5 are susceptible, but then adults, middle age, it can affect any age group. So, and not only that, not just for the poor. No, it can affect but the rich also. You can go to a center whereby the preparation of the food or the groceries were not top notch, and this thing happens. So we want to tell Nigerians, Lagosians to please, cholera can affect any age group irrespective of socioeconomic status. That's one. 2, in terms of the clear picture at the facility where at my own facility, we have, like I said, we have a good surveillance system. So the individual walked in, and due to interaction with the doctor will look at this is likely to be a cholera case. So the patient was put in a waiting area, an isolated area. Then rehydration started right away, intravenous fluid, and then the disease surveillance officers came around, laboratory involved in that facility took samples using their garments, preventive garments, and also through their infection prevention protocols, to take the sample.
I hope the person survived.
Survive.
That's cheering news. We've seen a lot of deaths, but
then, like you said, there are several government facilities across the nation, that in a sorry case. Government needs to do a lot.
Absolutely.
Utilize the basic care provision fund right now that is ongoing, to build, to fix your challenges in terms of infrastructure, in terms of manpower, and you go there.
You find some facilities that it's Doctors Without Borders providing healthcare services, and they're not at war.
They are not, exactly.
You see MSF in places where there's war, but these places are not at war. They're enjoying peace.
Exactly.
But the people servicing the healthcare centers are Doctors Without Borders. Well, Dr. Shalamoni, we have to thank you so much. Thank you for the work. We wish you the very best, and we do hope that everybody's able to wake up to their responsibilities. Dr. Shalamoni is a public health physician and MD, Mayor of Primary Health Center. Thank you once again.
It's a privilege. Thank you very much.
Well, we'll take a moment now. When we return, we'll turn our attention to the big screens. Oh, yes. Nigeria has been doing amazing things, box office streaming platforms, and we'll single out one of these amazing works. It's an epic. Oh, yes, this conversation will be epic as well. Stay with us.
Yes, indeed, it's the return of the grand epics, right? But it's also a season of the resurgence of amazing directors. And we have one of them in the house today whom we're celebrating. And of course, looking at one of his works that you just saw. Let's welcome movie director, filmmaker, Mr. Niyi Akinmolayan.
Akinmolayan.
Well, there's a tone to how you pronounce it. Let's hear it.
Akinmolayan.
Akinmolayan. It's
Yes.
quite different in meaning.
I know, right?
The way I said
you
it.
switch up the tones and it
just changes.
it just changes. Yes.
Yeah. Before we begin to talk about what's this movie now? Lishabi. I watched it and it was, it engendered a feeling of pride for me. We'll go into that much later on. But you have a knack for directing movies that tell profound stories, and I could talk about The Arbitration, which is one of your works as well, and so many other movies down the line. The House of Secrets, that's another powerful one. So what's your motivation, your whys for being a director before we delve into Lishabi?
Well, I mean, ideally, the reason you make films is because you believe you have something to tell everyone, or that you believe you have something so unique that you're the only one that can actually say those things. And the visual medium is powerful because there are a lot of things that verbally we can't say, but once we start showing it, it adds layers of meaning to it. And I have always been someone who has always been really interested in how to communicate a lot of social issues, in film. So you've mentioned really great films, whether it's The Arbitration that explored, sexual, harassment in the workplace, and the position of women in the workplace, whether it's House of Secrets that took us even back to the military era and what that meant, to a lot of people. And of course, recently Lishabi, which is, almost like a mirror of society right now, what we're trying to tell people to do for themselves. And so, I was a bit of a rebel when I was young. I was one of those kids who would do alutas, when I was in school. And growing up, you realize that there's a lot more you can say to millions of people with a film than you can say just screaming and shouting at the top of your voice. So that's one of the primary motivations, and it's driven the films that I choose to make as a filmmaker.
Writer, director of Lishabi, The Uprising. By the way, the movie has sort of awakened people in some sense. A lot of people didn't even know about the story. I didn't know there was such a rich, we know about all the other stories of other people, right? You can tell the story literally, but I didn't know we had such rich stories. Maybe you know about the culture, but not that kind of story, the interplays, the kingdoms, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I actually come from, rich history. So what really inspired that? I know that stories like that are naturally money makers. Right, so there's a money bit, but there has to be something more for you, because you strike me and the generality as a geek on the one hand.
I am.
You get it? So speak to us about the inspiration. What exactly was the pushing factor? I thought, Eureka, we're going to do this.
All right, so I come from, it's interesting, so I'm a bit geeky, but I come from a very artistic family. My parents really encouraged us to pursue the arts, so we're one of those families where, you must study science, but feel free to, act drama in church, in school, and I did a lot of that in school. I was also exposed early to Yoruba cinema, the Fadi Yoloros and all of us. So those are the things we watched, when we were kids, and that was kind of like my understanding of fantasy and storytelling, and those stories were really great. So when we got to a point as Anthill Studios, which is my studio, and we started making our own films, one of the big things we wrote on the board is when we get enough money, we're going to start making big epics. So I said, I'm going to look for all the Abijas and all of them. I'm going to bring them, and we're going to do a lot of visual effects and make this film. But the turning point came, I think it was 2021. I saw a clip. It was Lateef Adedimeji and Ibrahim Chata. It was an old film they had done maybe in 2020 or 2019, and they were fighting and they were throwing out these incantations to each other. And it was really beautiful. It felt like poetry to me. And I saw it, I reached out to Lateef and I said, hey, we're thinking about doing really grand epics. Whenever you have something really nice, I do not totally know these stories, reach out to me and let's talk. And it didn't happen immediately. Of course, we had to do King of Thieves, we did Jagun, we did Beast of Two Worlds, and the films.
You said you were part of all of that.
Oh yes, we were co-executive producers on the film, and we were fully involved at the studio in doing all the VFX work and all the production design and the likes. And when he came to me last year, he just walked to the door and he said, Niyi, I think we now have the story. I said, what's the story? He said, it's Lishabi. I said, who's Lishabi? And so just to, and I used to think I knew all of these heroes, but I realized that we were focused on the fancy ones, the Shongos, the Oguns, and all of that. I said, no. They call Egba people Egba Omolishabi. That's the guy who really, freed the Egbas from the rule of the Oyos. So he sat down, he was telling me the story, and I was on Google, and I was checking Wikipedia, and I was like, okay, how come this is such an important hero, and we have just one article? I think it was an article on Nairaland, that really talks about this story, and I just felt, the connection was just there, and he was really invested in, making the film, and he had done a beautiful work with Ayinla, and he's the son of the soil. He actually comes from the same place as Lishabi, and it was just a partnership that was going to work, so he said, can we come on board, and that's what we did. But this was a bit different because I also thought that if we're going to tell these stories, let's make it enticing, let's make it exciting, especially for the younger viewers. Let's not put our life in a small shrine in front of a courtyard. Let's build a grand palace.
Let's make him really bad.
Yeah, let's make it epic. All these fancy, Eboras and all these things. Let's add some bit of VFX. So we went there, we took a lot of creative license, we invented characters, like the Brian Chatter character was completely made up. He's not part of the lore of the story. Yes, even the macaroni character, just so that we can, but these are names that are bad names, and we felt that the story would have a lot more substance if we give, Lishabi a lot of all that extra to go. And this is just part one, so you can imagine what's coming next.
So for me, I'd like you to speak to, an aspect of the history, because I've seen it, and at the end it says the saga continues. So what are you telling us in the next?
You want to hear the spoiler?
I'm excited.
There are two sides of the story.
Okay.
I won't tell you the second one because that's a big spoiler. It's going to be revealed in the second.
We promise not to tell anyone. If you tell us, we'll tell anyone.
We'll try. I'll tell you behind camera. But the first thing that is an actual fact is he got the farmers to be part of a collective, and in one day they killed 600, Oyo Ilaris, those are like the tax collectors. They killed all of them. We're going to see a lot of that in the second one. And something else happened, you don't kill 600 Oyo Ilaris and expect to go home and chill. And that's going to be
Lishabi, the historical figure, really invoke, all of those spiritual beings to enable them fight the Oyo Ilaris?
So the word Lishabi is Enyorishabi, he's not an ordinary person.
Okay.
He's been empowered. You can argue about, the beings, but of course we're artists, so we're going to imagine them. But if you know Yoruba folklore very well, so there are details that people should pay attention to. Like if you look at his house, you see he's an ardent worshipper of Ogun, the god of iron, and because that's what they use. They use metal, cutlasses and hoes, in the farm. And once you are favored by the gods, what does it mean for a filmmaker to interpret that? Of course, the gods will always send help your way, and that's how we
one way or the other.
Yes, so he wasn't an ordinary person. Right. Everyone, every Egba person knows that, but we of course have to imagine what it means to not be an ordinary person, hence the creatures.
Two questions I must ask you. You talked about your background a bit, but I'm seeing here that you're a graphic designer, website designer.
I'm a lot of things.
I'm trying to match it, but we'll come to that because it's important to tell your story so people can maybe see themselves in you and say, hey, Niyi did this. You're one of the most sought after in the industry, right? And I know you like to stay humble. So they can say, well, that means I'm like him. I can be like him or even better. But I want to talk about this movie still a bit. And there's been a lot of reviews of the movies. I don't know how you handle reviews, particularly the critics. And I want you to tell us, when you do some creative work, you put in everything into it, I just see 2 lines of critical, just like that. I don't know how you handle it. But one of the critics has been, it looks like we're seeing the same actors in these movies, right? And they're wondering, whatever happened to the wider pool? Why aren't we getting newer actors? That's been one critic of this movie I'm sure you have seen. So first, how do you handle the general critics? Like, if you know what I did to do this movie, and that particular one.
All right, so you eventually mature as a filmmaker to handle criticism. When you start out, everything gets to you. You get very emotional. You react to everything. And then the more you do that, you now start realizing, you start putting things in perspective. If I make a film and 100 people are looking at the film, and 90 people love the film and 10 people do not love the film, I've made a successful film. That takes a while because the 10 people really get to filmmakers and they forget quickly, that there's lots of people who love your film. So over time, you've grown to start managing a bit of all that. Sometimes, if some criticism comes from a place of ignorance, you try to correct that. You don't compare this film at this budget with Game of Thrones. You have to be sure you're making the right kind of comparisons. And that's it. But you learn eventually that critics are like the audiences. They're just people who have the extra time to type their opinions, and put it online. So that's what I do. First of all, I ignore a lot, but because I'm also a commercial filmmaker, there is power in positive criticism, so we try to amplify that. If people are saying nice things about the film, amplify that, because it means more people will want to see the film. If they're saying negative things about the film, you look at it and say, okay, fine. But what we do is we're very, very, we self-criticize a lot. We look at ourselves and we say, okay, this is what we've done, this is not what we've done well. We already know a lot of the things people will say before we even release the film. So I wouldn't say that I have a thick skin, for criticism, but I've been able to manage it. For the second issue, which is having popular faces.
Like literally the same actors you can predict.
Yes,
You've seen them in this movie.
It's a dicey issue. And let me tell you why it's a very funny one. So I saw a couple of people who say, you're using the same actors. And I tried to trigger them and I said, okay, fine. Say I want to make another film about this, suggest actors, and they all mention the same actors. Now, what it says is that there's a problem, which we all need to accept. We need to raise, new potential, new actors, but we must also be very careful. These actors have worked, their butts off over the years. You're not going to make a Netflix original, which automatically means a lot more money, and you're going to throw them out. It's not going to happen. Netflix will not make these originals if they do not feel that it has faces that can actually get people to want to see the film.
So it's a business consideration.
Yes, it is. It has to be, a business decision. But what you do is, and if you've studied all Anthill films, we try to ensure that we use some of these bigger names to amplify the work. So a lot of the excitement has come from the performance of Macaroni, Liquid Rose. In part 2, we have I think we have 2 new acts again that we bring in. So it's going to be a gradual thing. You're not going to wake up and impose a person people do not know. They're not even going to be invested in the film. You're not going to put a poster out with somebody nobody cares about. They're not going to watch the film. So it's a business decision, but we have to be very careful about it. But also, when we say these things, we need to be sensitive, because what you're saying is that these actors don't deserve these opportunities, and it's wrong. So if I was going to make another big Yoruba epic, there's still all the big guys that we've not even featured, that we loved seeing growing up. I'm going to give a bit of a spoiler, but one of the things we did in the second one is we brought Abijawara.
It's the best spoiler.
Yes, but we're going to introduce it soon. But I thought it's a good thing to say on the network, and that's what I want to do. It's a good thing for this, older actors, and they inspire me a lot. I watched a lot of them before I became a filmmaker. So I'm working with Uncle Jide Kosoko or Gabelo. When I get to set, I first frustrated and say, Uncle, let me tell you.
Pay homage.
Yes, I pay homage. And it takes a lot to even give them directions, but then the stories they share on set, the experience they bring, we need it. I need it as a filmmaker. So it's not going to change. We're going to keep using these faces while we gradually grow, the newer acts. And, in a few, years to come, some of the people that played secondary roles in these films are going to lead films. Everyone should take their time. It's turn by turn.
The actors deliver. Really, there's no miscast in what has been done. From the point of view of somebody that's reviewing it. But speak to this. As I said earlier, it's a return of the epics or the stories about our historical figures. There's Funmilayo Ransome Kuti. There's House of Ga, which was another profound story. There's Lishabi. which is a great Egba historical figure. What are the lessons, particularly, that we should be taking away from this? How have we moved on from this story of oppression, repression, leadership failure? So what are we taking away from this? Because that's the essence of art, really, to mirror life.
And so if you compare all these stories, you see that there's a common thread in all of them, but they all remind us of something, and that is that history repeats itself. It constantly repeats itself. So we've been through a very crazy period, in Nigerian politics, where a lot of the conversation has been, don't sell your votes, stand up for your right, stand up for what you believe in. But one of the things these films have been doing, especially if you pay attention to films like Jagun, Fumilayo, and Lishabe, it's that there is nothing as powerful as a united people, as a united front. But Lishabe takes the story even further. He decides to lead these people, but before he took his own version of the collective, or his own arrow, as they call it, he served every member of the group. He participated in, working on their farms, and so that when it was time for him to ask for what he wanted, everyone was willing to work with him. That's the failure in leadership that we are experiencing as a country, where people do not understand their role as leader. And we're hoping that this story, wakes everyone up and says, hey, this is how great things happened in the past. And if we're going to make anything happen now, this is the only way, because history can only repeat itself.
I want to ask about the business part of it. We're talking business, right? And it's important to also balance things. And there's lots of moving parts. So business. Some have described what is playing out now as the crude oil era. So we have the crude, the stories, the culture. I mean, these are intriguing stories. And then there's the IOCs who come to mind, I know you catch my drift.
I know. I haven't heard it being compared with crude oil, but now that you say it.
I do that mostly, actually. And the challenge is, we've seen what happened, or is still happening in that sector. We've not been able to build a structure. It's just come take the wealth, even sell it back to us as petrol, right, and refined product. So I know that you still have to talk about it. We need money. The actors need money. The studios need the money. But the challenge is, first, are we getting a fair share of the pie? On the one hand, and are we building something such that if the IOCs leave, don't worry, we have our own refinery, our Port Harcourt refinery, our Kaduna refinery, such that we also have something to show the world and even develop other countries. Imagine if Nigeria is getting stories from Ghana and all of that. What do you see in that sense?
It's a very good question, actually. And, there are ways to answer these questions that it would get a bit controversial if you're not careful. Here's how to put it. This crude oil is usually the starting point. And for every country that we've seen a, spurt of growth, in their industry, it always starts like this. The difference is how the countries themselves handle those opportunities. Now, when you see a Netflix come to Nigeria and they excite you to make big films because it's going to generate a bit of income, you spend more on technical quality, you spend a bit more on a lot of things, you have to train people to do the work. And what it does is that it improves, everybody's life, on that chain. But we're going to have a problem if they decide, to pull out. We, as a country, we haven't strategically positioned ourselves, to succeed with or without them. We should be growing the cinema culture, not shut it down. It makes no sense. Every other part of the world, cinema is rising everywhere in the world. Now you can see all those big box office films doing numbers all over the world. That's what we should do. We shouldn't say, oh, streamers are here and then let's stray away from our culture. We should look out for local streaming opportunities, local distribution opportunities. So India is a very good example, right? There's a lot of activity, Netflix, Amazon in India. But what they've done is they've also used it to grow their own local stuff. Now, how does, the government help in that? You need to be very, very intentional the government can say, hey, Netflix, we love what you're doing. We're not going to tax you too much. We're not going to drive you away, but you have to establish something here. For every you have to do this amount of productions. You have to work with this amount of people. You have to set up shop here. They don't have shop here. Your Amazon has studios, in places in the world. Come. We'll give you a big place in
build something.
Build something. If you do not build that thing, we're not going to allow you play in this space. But we're not going to stress you. We're just going to work with you. Now, what would happen is that when you have tons of people working, there's knowledge transfer, right? They can leave anytime they want. We have that knowledge, and then we can grow from there. So a lot of the visual effects talent in the world is being shipped to India. That is because American companies set up shops there, ended up training people, created a pipeline to ensure that work constantly flows to those. It's cheaper labor, but what it has done is you now have other films made in India by Indians. The Patan, Jawan, the Ararat, the Bahubalis, all those big films. If you look at the end credits, you see a lot of Indians there. That's what needs to happen. Until, as a studio, we're very deliberate. Everything you've seen in this film was made by Nigerians.
Beautiful.
The cinematography, which everyone is talking about, the music, and we have everything in-house as a studio. Imagine raising that
even the
to
set.
Everything.
We have
That's what I wanted you to talk about.
We have to run out. I know I promised that we're going to talk about your personal life and your work, but maybe when we have the part 2.
Sure.
We'll have that conversation.
Yes,
so, hey, this is just a pause. Watch out. The saga continues.
The saga continues.
Not just for Lishabi, but also for the director, Niyi Akinmolayan.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I got it right this time. Oh,
thank you.
Go book you.
Thank you very much.
Well, but before we go, Kade, we have something.
Quickly
touch on.
Yes, the Nigeria Correctional Center had put out a statement after that showing at the National Assembly. The officials saying it was a social media suspension, and they said that their attention has been drawn to it, and they're saying that this is gross misconduct from the official. But how did the official get to the National Assembly anyway? Didn't the official come from your office wearing your uniform? So lots of questions to be answered, but they put out a statement saying that they view it as an act of gross misconduct aimed at misleading the public, but we're yet to see what action has been taken by them to either reprimand or write that. So that's just to give a balance.
And did Mr. Anugwa get a letter of suspension? We'd like to see that, because this doesn't provide the closure.
Well, they say they served him, but we've not seen the copy.
Haven't seen it. And if indeed he was served, why would he say something contrary on the floor of the National Assembly? So those questions still require answers. But we must anchor at this point, and thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We'll return tomorrow with another exciting one. I am Bukola Koka.
I'm definitely going to finish the Lishabi movie because I didn't quite finish it because of the show. I'm Kaido Kikilo. Have a great day. Sunrise Daily is next. Stay with Channels Television.